global Ireland, elected onto the Security Council of the United Nations and with a new coalition government established in Dublin. Today we ask Bertie Ahern, the second longest Taoiseach or Prime Minister in the history of Ireland, how will the country fare in the post-pandemic and the post-Brexit age? Join us on the Alex Salmond Show, on air and online. Welcome to the Alex Salmond Show from Strichen, Aberdeenshire in Scotland, where today we ask the second longest serving Taoiseach or Prime Minister in Irish history, how will Ireland fare in the post-pandemic age? Bertie Ahern served as Taoiseach for 11 years, winning 3 successive general elections. His length of tenure is second only to Eamon de Valera, the founder of Fianna Fáil. Bertie Ahern's achievements in office include the Belfast Peace Agreement and the development of the Irish tiger economy. Today we ask Bertie Ahern, how stands Ireland in the post-pandemic and the post-Brexit age? But first, over to Tasmina in Glasgow. Your tweets, your emails and your messages.
Thank you, Alex. Last week's show covered the response from New Zealand to coronavirus and interviews with top New Zealand public health academic Professor Michael Baker and Dr. Mark Konigsbaum. Caroline comments, sobering insights from both contributors. It seems early and stringent measures have been key to tackling COVID-19 more effectively. Notable, Scotland has made progress since diverging from a rest of UK strategy. Hopefully this puts us on a better footing for winter. John Eckstein says, what was in New Zealand's favour is that she's relatively isolated from the rest of the world. She has a relatively small population who were and are mature enough to adhere to the safety precautions, and they also have good border control. Anne says, first watch of a great show, learned a lot more regarding the pandemic. Wales have been on track, so now people keep sensible and strong not to go backwards for the sake of a year. Morag says, spot on, Alex. Australia is also an island but pursuing suppression and failing. Border situation is similar to Scotland and Westminster. Western Australia is now back to near normal, while Melbourne folks are in lockdown again. I don't think you could have been any clearer. Jones says, well done. We should all learn from New Zealand how to manage this virus. Trevor says, they haven't killed it. It will be back when people start travelling to the end of the world again. And finally, Roselle says, all the women leaders have done great.
There is a new coalition government in Ireland, with Fianna Fáil back in the driving seat and Micheál Martin sworn in as Taoiseach or Prime Minister. Now, no great surprise there. My guest today, Bertie Ahern, led 3 coalition governments between the years 1997 and 2008, and he was a Fianna Fáil Taoiseach and Prime Minister. However, the new government in Dublin comes with a clear difference. The 2 great parties of the state, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, have joined together in coalition for the first time in a century of independence. They did this to keep out the upstart Sinn Féin, who actually topped the poll in last general election. Micheál Martin's administration have inherited a stunning international diplomatic success, with Ireland elected onto the Security Council of the United Nations for the first time. However, that government will also have to deal with the substantial economic fallout of both COVID and Brexit. So how fares the land of Ireland? I'm joined by former Taoiseach Bertie Ahern, who's speaking to me from his home in Dublin. Bertie Ahern, welcome to the Alex Salmond Show.
Thank you very much, Alex, and nice to be talking to you again, and nice to be on your show.
Bertie, you're no stranger to coalition governments. I mean, you led 3 coalitions in your time as Taoiseach, but a coalition between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael is something different altogether. How surprising a development is that in the context of the 100-year history of Irish independence?
I suppose it's not totally surprised, Alex, because since 2016, Fianna Fáil had been supporting Fine Gael in government, but from the outside with a confidence supply arrangement. So they were working closer together than they probably had ever done over the decades.
But Bertie Ahern, you were Ireland's second longest serving Prime Minister, or Taoiseach, second only to Eamon de Valera himself. It must have been very, very surprising as a leader of Fianna Fáil and a Taoiseach to see that your party, your old party, going into coalition with the great rivals of 100 years. That is quite a spectacular development. It's like the Tories and the Labour Party going into coalition in the UK.
Yeah, you know the history, Alex. Both parties kind of grew out of the pro-agreement and anti-agreement of December 1921. They went their separate ways after the Civil War. Fine Gael, first of all, set up Fine Gael, it was called, and Fianna Fáil, then under de Valera, was set up in 1926. They were the two enemies, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, right down through history. Civil War politics probably continued for many decades in Ireland, and then economic issues took over. So it is new, but I suppose, like everything, Alex, a new generation, a younger generation, things were not as polarised as the Northern, the Good Friday Agreement kind of settled down and the peace process developed. Issues were not as difficult and strident as they were even in the 60s, 70s and 80s. So I think people in the last election, Fine Gael lost votes, Fianna Fáil did not continue the gains that they did in 2016. And therefore, this kind of forced a position where if we were to have a stable government and not go back to having another election, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael had to go together. So I think it'll work out okay. It's different, it'll be difficult, but you know, the challenges of economic issues and COVID-19 issues. So we'll have to see how it plays out, Alex.
And how surprised were you to see the success, the breakthrough of Sinn Féin in the February election? And was that, in your estimation, due mainly to economic issues or the constitutional issue in Ireland?
No, it was very much economic issues. I think what happened, Alex, is simple as this, that Fine Gael were in government. Fianna Fáil were seen by a sizable amount of the electorate to be propping them up and supporting them. So it left an opportunity for Sinn Féin, who had a good election. They kept it very much on the economy. They had a good housing spokesperson. Housing is a big issue here, the lack of them in the Republic. And they had a good finance spokesperson, and they had a good health spokesperson. So they kept their campaign cleverly to 3 or 4 front faces of the party who were good performers. And they, I think they probably surprised, well, they did surprise themselves, Alex, because you know our system, it's not first past the post, it's proportional representation, multi-seat constituencies. And if they had stood more candidates, they would have arguably won probably another 10 or 12 seats. And would have been the largest party. So I don't think they saw their own success coming. So now they're in a good position from their development point of view. They're now the main opposition party, and Mary Lou McDonald is the leader of the opposition. So she'll get far more coverage, publicity, and all the things that go with being the frontline opposition spokesperson.
Well, I once said in the nature of Scottish politics that oppositions tend to become governments at some point. Would that be what Mary Lou McDonald is thinking now, that she is in a strategically strong position as the opposition, the dominant opposition force in the Dáil?
Yeah, I think so. It's how they perform, how they deal with opposition, constructive opposition. I think Sinn Féin, traditionally tended to be against everything and for nothing. And, now I think they're going to have to nuance their position in a more constructive, objective way, supporting issues when it makes sense to do so, being strident in opposition when not. That'll be new for them. You and I would say, Alex, normally an opposition would develop that position easy enough, but it has not been something that Sinn Féin have ever had to do. So I'm not saying they won't do it. They have some very good people. They have capable people who are not involved in the troubles. They have articulate spokespersons, certainly a group of them. So their perform. I think the electorate will watch their performance over the next few years. So it's a big opportunity for them, but it's also a difficulty for them how they actually create a constructive opposition that's seen by the electorate to be ready to be in government.
And how about the government itself, the new administration? I mean, you know the personalities very well, Micheál Martin, Leo Varadkar. How easily will they operate together as Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister in the new coalition?
Yeah, I think Micheál Martin has been around a long time. He was in all of my governments. He was, back when I was leader of the opposition, he was an opposition spokesperson. So he has served in the departments of health and foreign affairs and industry, education. So he's a wise politician. He's, I think he's well up for the task. It's a rotational Taoiseach. So in 2.5 years' time, at the end of 2022, Leo Varadkar comes back in again. So he has a fixed period to perform and to use his energies and his experience to do well. So I think it's a great honour for him. I think he will see it as a great opportunity in his political career.
This recent stunning diplomatic success of being elected to the Security Council of the United Nations, give us an impression of how important that is for the prestige and reputation of Ireland worldwide.
Yeah, it was very important to us, Alex. We've worked very hard to win the seat in the council. I think the Department of Foreign Affairs and the government are determined to make it work and to do a good job on it. I think they'll have to be realistic as well, but also ambitious in what they tend to do. The council nowadays, as you're familiar with, Alex, from all our times, it has a huge workload. It's dealing with about 30 country situations and 20 cross-cutting thematic issues all around global security. This will be a great diplomatic challenge for us, but one that the country is very proud of, and particularly on peacekeeping, on conflict resolution, on reconciliation. These are the areas where we'd hope to focus on.
Bertie Ahern, and of course you were Taoiseach in the onset of the world financial crisis of just more than 10 years ago. What's your estimation of how this situation compares to that great recession following the financial collapse around the world? Is it more or less serious in your estimation?
What is fascinating for a guy like me, Alex, and I'm sure you too, is how the countries have changed. The first thing everybody did was 13 years ago when the problem started. They stopped spending money. They closed up. They brought in austerity measures left, right, and centre. And we suffered in that in Ireland. Of course, we had a property boom, which was a lot of our own making too. There's a very different attitude being taken by the powers that be, both in the European Central Bank and other institutions, the World Bank, IMF, to this crisis that was taken 12 or 13 years ago. So therefore, my conclusion is, if they stick with that for a period, I think we can get through this, not easily, but within a fairly quick time span.
Join us after the break, where I'll continue my conversation with the second longest serving Prime Minister in Irish history, Bertie Ahern. Welcome back. I'm in conversation with Bertie Ahern, the second longest serving Prime Minister Taoiseach in the history of Ireland. Bertie Ahern, Ireland is facing a double economic whammy with the economic impact of Brexit. I mean, you must be tearing your hair out as you look at the negotiations between the British government and the European Union, sort of staggering towards a potential cliff edge at the end of this year.
Yeah, well, you know my view, Alex, on Brexit. It's a disaster start to finish, and continues to be so. But anyway, we are where we are, as young people say nowadays, and there's no extension. The British government, Michael Gove's made that clear. The end of the year is the transition period ends. I think as we talk, the EU UK discussions are continuing. They're continued in right through July and August now, and we hope that this intensified schedule of talks brings us to uh, some solutions. Because I think if we drift into September, October, it'll be too late. It's a complex issue. If you hit October, all of the whatever agreement is reached, if there is agreement, I assume and hope there will be, but if there's one, that has to be translated into over 20 languages. The legal texts have to be checked to make sure there's nothing in the translations that create problems. And we're on to a new regime from the 1st of January. And the areas that are outstanding, as I understand it, fisheries, the level playing field, the law enforcement, and the judicial cooperation and governance. So these are the issues that have to be cracked during the remainder of this month and through the holiday month of August. So, it's down to the wire stuff once again. But Brexit for over 4 years now has tended to be that way.
Now, Bertie Ahern, as Taoiseach, you established a very secure relationship with London government and steering through the Good Friday Agreement in Northern Ireland. Would you have any advice for Micheál Martin and how he can establish a working relationship with the Johnson government?
During the Tony Blair years and during Gordon Brown years, there was considerable interest in Number 10 in Irish issues. There was a lot of people in Number 10, even at that senior level, that dealt fairly well with Ireland, and the Irish table was always high on the agenda. One of the very, very sad things about the UK leaving and the UK government leaving the European Union is that daily contact of ministers, politicians, officials, advisors, agencies, meeting at European meetings, meeting in Strasbourg and Brussels, meeting in London and Dublin, that's ended. That completely ends on the 31st of December this year. Something was built up from 1973. That close contact is gone. And I think there's a lack of appreciation that is the case. The formal structures and the informal structures all cease on the 31st of December this year. And there isn't really any other alternative now other than the institutions of the Good Friday Agreement. And, that kind of personal contact, the formal meetings are one thing, Alex, but it's the relationships you build up. It's the contact that people know who to phone or, who to text or, where get on to people. That's gone. And what's been built up over the period since 73 is gone. And I think that's a great sadness. And it's something that has been badly underestimated in opinion and what's been written about Brexit.
Now, in recent interviews, the new Taoiseach, Micheál Martin, has been noticeably cautious about any prospects for an immediate border poll to test the question of Irish unity. Is he right to express that caution under current circumstances?
He is, Alex, yes. The reality is, Alex, that, and it's kind of a harsh reality, but even though the border has been a big issue on this island since 1921, the amount of work, analysis, preparedness of how you would eliminate it and have one island economy, the amount of work on that is very little. In fact, it wouldn't fill one of your folders. So there's a huge amount of preparedness and legislative examination and legal examination, and how you would integrate the Garda Síochána, the Garda police force in the Republic with the PSNI in Northern Ireland, the legal systems, all these things would have to be worked through before you could go to the people. And none of that work has never been done. We've been talking at each other for years. And so if somebody wants to rush it for political reasons, well, what will happen is you'll get a political answer and the people will reject it. I think, my view is not that we should never do it. Of course, I'm a Republican. It is the number one aim of Fianna Fáil, the party I led and for years and was actively involved at every level, that unification of the country. But it has to be done properly, properly organised, properly negotiated, trying to convince people. Any other way will only lead to hardship and failure.
In your political career, Bertie Ahern, finally, you've seen rapid economic development of Ireland beyond anything that could have been imagined. You've seen the precious prize of peace established through the island. Now you see the challenges of COVID and the Brexit looming not on the horizon but in the very immediate future in terms of the reality of it. These are extraordinary developments. Have you any thoughts on how Ireland is placed to face that new world that we're in?
Yeah, I think Ireland is in a good position, Alex. Our population is rising all the time. Thankfully, education levels are rising all the time. Most of our young people now go to third level. High proportion of our third level graduates go on to do PhDs and further studies. We're continuing to attract an enormous amount of foreign direct investment into the country. And employment in Ireland today is double what it was when I was Labour Minister dealing with the high unemployment and crisis back 30 years ago. But we have a generation who are by and large hardworking and are anxious to drive things forward. So yes, we've challenges, but I think that the future, if handled right, if managed right, if sensible decisions are taken, which I hope will happen, and if we continue to keep a peaceful island more than anything else, that held us back, as you know, Alex, for 40 years, and at least now Ireland can be seen around the world as a place of economic sustainability, economic advantage. Not a place where there's just trouble, as we were seeing for a long time. So we have a lot of pluses, and the minuses, I think, just have to be handled very carefully and delicately.
And in terms of that international role, Ireland, which was once called the island beyond the island, now is assuming some centre stage in European terms and indeed world terms. What role will Ireland be able to play in that new environment?
Yeah, we're very, very happy, and I suppose on two fronts. We had two great successes recently with the Security Council, which we were talking about, where we'll have a seat for 2021, 2022. Our finance minister is to take over the Euro Group as chair of the Euro Group. So I think increasingly our people are working outside of the country. They're involved in developing. We have nearly as much Irish investment in the United States now as we've United States investment in Ireland, which is an extraordinary position of Irish companies now being able to bring FDI the other way. I'm not sure Mr. Trump is aware of that, but it is a fact. So we continue to, I think, punch above our weight. But when you're small, when you're a trading country, when you're exporting, like we survive on huge levels of exports. If we were to be just supplying ourselves, we'd go underwater very quickly, Alex. So we have to be competitive. We have to be bright. We have to be smart. We have to be innovative. We have to work hard. When you're an island of, in north and south, 6 million or so, but continue to rise, we have to work very well. But there are opportunities in that. And I do see opportunities for Northern Ireland if the cards are played well. They will still be partially dealing with EU regulation and the EU markets, and they'll also have the UK position of being out of Brexit. And so if it's played right, they can do the best of both worlds. And if it's not played right, it'll be a disaster. But I think people realise that if they play it right, Northern Ireland could become a very good place to work and invest in. And I'd love to see that. And it gives Northern Ireland the stability that it probably hasn't never had. So these are challenges, but I think they're ones that bring a lot of opportunity, Alex.
Bertie Ahern, the second longest serving Taoiseach in the history of Ireland, thank you very much for joining me on the Alex Salmond Show.
Thank you very much, Alex, and pleasure to be on your programme.
In the 100-year history of independence, Ireland has never faced greater challenges or greater opportunities. After a shaky start, the Dublin government handled the COVID crisis well, much better on any measurement than their London counterparts. Irish diplomacy has succeeded spectacularly in securing elevation to the Security Council of the United Nations, but have failed to persuade Westminster to cock-annie on Brexit. The consequent danger to the Irish economy is very clear indeed, but there is some level of opportunity. Faced with a clear choice between London and Brussels, Ireland has chosen Europe. As a result, its clear position within the single market will give it a degree of competitive advantage compared to Britain, which will to some extent offset the turbulence of Brexit. And then there's the question of Irish reunification. It may not be an immediate prospect, but it can be argued that every rational reason for the partition of a century ago has either been eroded or has disappeared entirely. Now, rationality doesn't always determine human history, but it has a habit of shaping our ends, rough hew them how we will. And so from Tasmina, myself and all at the show, it's goodbye for now, stay safe, we'll see you again next week.